All right. Good morning, Volker. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Jared.
Yeah, I always forget it's the time difference. Are you in a
Yeah,
different office than you were last time?
we had to expand,
Oh,
so we had to
nice.
build some. Yeah, we had to build some new office so everybody can have a seat. 'Cause-
Is it the same
which
building
is
or the
nice.
same location?
Yeah, same. Yeah, we just you were here, right? So we just
Yeah,
extended the office that we had and just built some extra space, some extra
perfect.
walls. So now we have a little conference room that we can sit in now. So
Very nice.
startup life.
Is the goldfish farm still there?
Yeah, that's the organic, the salad farm. What is it? Hydroponics. Yeah,
And
all
you do
still there,
those
still
things?
going, still growing. Yeah, they're
They're
growing
growing
too in
too.
their own way. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now it's good. We expanded a little bit here since you were here last. That's good, but we're leaving the space in about 3 to 6 months.
Oh, very soon.
To go to new space. So lots is changing.
Yeah, certainly. So what are the day-to-day Vertico activities? Are you still doing a lot of printing yourselves?
Yeah, we are. I mean, as you know, we're in dive straight in. I think, as you know, we do both printing and sales of machines. And sales of machine market right now is booming. It's incredible. So we spent a lot of time doing that, and we've doubled our team, in the last 2 or 3 months, just to keep up with that demand. Of which the biggest frustration at the moment is global supply chain. So we have the big chip shortage that's going on. We have extremely long lead times on robots. We have long lead times on other chips, products with chips, which is basically anything with a motor with a frequency drive is an issue right now. But we're printing in the meantime. So any projects we do on the machine that we have here available. And one of the things we're focusing on a lot now is we launched a new product line called Monnier, which you might have seen on the socials, which is a line of planters. So we're focusing on that to try to bring that to market. So that's one of the things that's really keeping us busy.
Nice. What do you think has to do with the bump in sales? Is that in the past month, 2 months, quarter?
So what I've seen over years is that it's somehow it's a little bit cyclical. I mean, you always try to kind of guess why are people buying what when. And sometimes you think maybe it's related to fiscal years. People are trying to spend their budget by the end of the year, maybe not. And actually, what we've noticed is that often at the end of the year, a lot of sales happen. So second half of the year, a lot of sales happen. But now with the lead time short difficulties, we're seeing that they're more spread out, because if you buy a machine from us now, the lead time alone in a robot puts us into February next year. Like we just, we don't have stock of robots. We don't order 10 of them at once. We don't have that size. So we order per project because they can, differ too in size and shape and payload and whatever the client wants. So, we just can't deliver anything before February, March next year. It's just full. So now you're seeing more of a leveling out of sales in that sense. And one of the main drivers of sales for us, but I think for most, is the US market. For some reason, the US has decided to invest heavily and fast the way they do in concrete printing. So a lot of our machine sales currently are in the US.
That's great. Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah.
Is it mostly overseas or the US? And why I asked like the past month or the past quarter, for the past like 6 months, the US has been in like kind of a fiscal downturn. The stock market's been going down, but in the past like 1 month, 2 months, it's been going up, 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 up. So when people have more money, I figure it's easier to make investments like that.
I think so. I think that might be part of it. I don't think we as an industry so young notice the changes in the global market that quickly. Of course, we're all looking at a potential recession in the US next year. At least that's what you hear in the media. How much that's going to affect our day to day, I'm not sure. Right now, there's such a large demand for these machines that there are already enough people that are, doing counter cyclical investment as well, in which they say, even if we have an economic downturn, we got to start investing in reduction of labor, right? For which this type of automation is very interesting.
Yeah.
So things like that, concrete printing ticks a lot of boxes. So hopefully we'll be saved from a lot of negative effects from any economic downturn we see next year.
When am I going to get to see a Vertico printer in the United States?
There's one there, and there will and there's one in the north east. Can't say much more. There's one on the water right now. So there's one going across the ocean. There will be another one in Florida by November. And there will be a fourth one also installed before December. So that'll be 4 machines by the end of this year.
How many of those will need to be kept secret or stealthy or private?
I think only the one.
Okay,
the machine in Florida is already announced. So that's a company called Printed Patio in Florida, which are great guys, and they're a startup too. They've been doing some printing on their smaller machine. They've been starting up, and actually, it's a funny story because the guys that started there, Justin, he once emailed me, about having a small printer, and he said, "Look, can you check out my system if it's any good?" And I said, "Well, you could change this and that," because I had some experience in starting up. And they said, "Okay, great." And then they said, "Oh, we're trying out these different material mixes." And I said, "Oh, we have our material mix too." And he said, "I've been using this one online." And he actually linked to one of the mixes we put online years ago as an open source mixture. Nice. So he found us again, and then he was trying out some Slicer software, and we had launched Slicer XL as a sort of easy step up for people getting into the market, very simple Slicer. And he emailed their support desk, and he got an email back from me saying, "Hey, it's me again." So he said all the roads lead back to Vertico, and now a year later he bought a machine. So I'm very happy to have him as a client. It's fantastic. There's another machine going to California. They're probably going to be launching a lot of information about that by the end of the year. So they'll probably be open about it, but I'm gonna leave it to them to announce, right? Yeah.
Some of them might already be on my lists. I know Printed Patio. I met them at World of Concrete a while ago, and they were really excited about 3D printed construction. And it's good to hear they ordered a machine. They're ready to get going now.
They are. They really know what they're doing. And what I like about their approach as well is that they're really going into it to get a return on investment on the products. And it's a return on investment that I see strongly in our line of planters. So I can go on and on about those two because, I just love the aesthetic that we're able to realize. And Justin of Printed Patio shares that view. So I'm sure, I love the fact that other enthusiastic people are going to be using the same machine to try and conquer the market, which is, far enough away that it's not going to affect us in any way in terms of business. So there's a really great exchange we can do there of trying to, develop that market together, sending designs to each other and whatnot. So I really look forward to seeing how they hit the ground running in a couple of months.
Yeah, it's good timing to have you on after I just released the video, 11 Lies About 3D Printed Houses.
Let's go. We can repeat it.
About the houses. You never promoted. It's not all about the houses. You've always been talking about, it's about the designs, the parametric design, and things that can create an ROI, a real business. And since the beginning, you had some qualms about housing with 3D printed construction.
Yeah, and one of the main reasons is that I don't have a background in construction, right? So one of the main reasons for me that I find it difficult to imagine the ROI is because I don't know how much it costs to build a house and what the difficulties are. So that's in that sense,
I'm the opposite. It's hard for me to the ROI because I do have a background in construction.
Right. So together we can go on and on compare notes, right? But so in that sense, I'm not the best judge of what savings can it bring to building and construction of housing. But when I look at it from a perspective of concrete printing, I see obviously the extremely high material costs that still are a difficulty for us in the industry, right? And then when you hear that the amount of concrete that goes into a 2-story house can go up to 90,000 euros, you got to start thinking just on the back of an envelope. You got to make a calculation: is that going to give me a return on investment on a house if that's how much I'm spending on the concrete alone, let alone the printing, let alone the setting up a machine, let alone the transport. So those difficulties are some of the main things that I find challenging in that business case. But clearly the market is not in agreement with me whatsoever, right? So massive investment in housing printing, and I totally get there's a requirement for housing and that there's a need and people, there's certainly a market, so the money's there. And I also believe that there will be a lot of economies of scale going on. So, perhaps if you do this calculation a little bit more optimistically than I do, you see the return on investment closer.
Yeah, it's about where the ball's going, not where the ball is.
Yeah, and for me, where the ball's going is still hard to judge, and other people are much more confident that they kicked it the right way. In the meantime, on the short term, I already much more clearly see the applications of concrete printing not in housing. Right, there are business cases that you have here, smaller scale, and obviously we're focusing on the more high detailed architectural type thing with bigger overhangs or planters, columns, facade elements, these things. So it's the prefabricated side, and so you see housing and architectural style elements, and only slowly the more prefabricated applications. So I think that there's a huge market potential there for prefab style concrete printing, which answers nicely the challenges of, this new technology and printing indoors with climate control and all these other control factors of printing inside is a good combination right now at this stage in innovation, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's all about the innovation, and it's a new industry, and it's improving so fast all the time. So many different people are working on all of the different aspects of it. So there's the dual-sided, you need to keep improving it, but also you need to make profit on the machines that they have now, so that the company continues funding the R&D. I mean, I'm sure even though you have some of these concepts like the planters and other things, there's still probably some additions you'd like to make to the printer.
Absolutely. Focusing so much on or having the luxury of selling as many machines as we are now means that we, the flip side of that is we have less and less time for development. So, I hired a R&D engineer recently because we found that we weren't spending enough time doing the things we wanted to do and improve on the machine. So he's back on that, which is very nice, which includes things like a start-stop on the machine or color agents that are added. And these things are things we want as well. But also more detailed things like improvements on connections between hoses or between the print head, but also the motors and the size and the power. So there's so much you can do, not to mention the software side, which always has room for improvement, right? You can automate it more, do better. We're finding now on one of the projects we're doing, which has to do with the manholes, which sometimes you see as a project that people are doing as a business case. We're finding now that, which is interesting for you if you know something about concrete printing, usually when you use the speed of the robot to control the thickness of a layer, in width, but you can also raise the height and lower the height of the robot. So you can do, the non-planar double curve with orientation type shapes. Mm-hmm. And what we thought initially was that if we have the speed of the robot, we'll double the width of the line if we keep the height the same, right? And then if you have the height of the robot, then obviously you're going to influence. So we thought there was a linear relationship there. But it turns out that that's true only within a very small range. When you start doing very high speeds and very thin layers, it's not a linear curve. It turns out to be that there's sort of not exponential, but there's a curve, so to speak. So we're defining that now and adding that to our slicers now to make it even more accurate when you're doing really high speed and really complex stuff. So such a long way to go.
Yeah, I think it'll be improving not just 3D printed construction, but automated construction in general, bringing in the software and people on the job site. And I include landscapers as a contractor. It's not the house itself, but it's still a trade. It's a construction trade, landscaping. And especially if you're building something rather than cutting the grass, it's much more analogous. So
there's applications there. There's applications there too. Landscaping is a big thing, not only planters, but also we're doing foundations now, or borders, or tiles, or walls. These things are definitely all on the sort of RFQs that are coming in.
Nice. So you have the new guy for R&D, and what other recent team members have you added?
With new project management, we have somebody hired now for quality assurance. So what we noticed, for example, on the flower pots is we can deliver flower pots that look great. This is proven. You can see the photos, we can make the prints, it's all great. But we don't know what happens when you leave them outside for 10 years because nobody knows that, right? Because nobody's tried it. So we need to pay more attention to how analyzing up front what we expect to happen. So for example, she recently started an experiment to see what type of coatings we could add onto the prints for putting them outside here. Freeze thaw is something that we're very interested in to see, how does the water seep into the concrete, and then expand and contract with frost to see where the cracking occurs. So we're learning things about our print and our print path. We had a bench we put outside that ended up cracking for this reason, and we found out that the layers were not connected well enough, so it left a little bit of a gap because it was quite a complex design. So now we're learning, okay, we need to fill in those gaps as well, maybe after the fact from the side, or even coat. So now we're using a nano coating that is hydrophobic to kind of go on with that. So that's one of our new hires, is a quality assurance person to write standards for our products, because I don't want to be delivering planters that fail. This is a big issue right now. And that's why we're also quite slow in launching them to a consumer level, because we want to be sure they're right before we send them out in large volume.
Would hydrophobic coating prevent the water from leaving the concrete?
So these hydrophobic coatings, they do allow breathing. But that's about as much as I know. So we're doing the experiments to see what happens, right? In theory, you can work a lot of this out, but they allow breathing. But on the one side, that's bad because the water can seep back in. On the other side, it's good because the concrete can cure. So that's something she's really working on, reading, the academic papers that are written and trying out the different samples. And then we're going to put them in practice and see if we can get some feedback from that. We posted, I think, yesterday, a picture of a bench that we load tested with 1,000 kilos of cement bags, right? So this bench, we're doing a lot of this testing on. It's a bench that we installed at the museum Singer in a place called Lave here in Holland, and they're outside benches. So we're going to also try a coating and put them outside as well, and allow that to, sort of give us some feedback on what they do in real life, which we can then apply to the pots as well.
Do you consistently get snow in the winters there?
No, not at all. Unfortunately, I enjoy snow around Christmas, but unfortunately, no.
So it won't be that test. The frost question isn't so important.
No, you get freezing, right? So even if you don't get snow, you get freezing here, and it's wet. So it's still an issue. That's not to say that if you tried this out in Norway, you wouldn't get completely different results. And also, we have clients, in the Middle East who are dealing with the exact opposite problem. We're dealing, first of all, with UV issues from the light that we have, but also the extreme heat puts a lot of stress on the material. So we're lucky to be sort of in the middle of that, right? We have quite a contemporary climate, but yeah, you're going to see experiments both ways.
Yeah, it seems like 60, 70 Fahrenheit is kind of the ideal temperature for printing in the nighttime, if possible, for outdoors.
I have no idea. For me, that's like gibberish. I have no idea what 70 Fahrenheit is.
Yeah, it's just room temperature.
Okay, yeah, room temperature is nice. So we found that, but I think I might have explained it before. We've been able to print here at 5 degrees Celsius, which is obviously extremely cold. We've been able to print at 35 degrees Celsius, which is obviously extremely hot. But even though there is a range in which you would like to print, which is optimal, it's actually quite large. So people are sometimes afraid that they have to climate control the space really, really tightly. That's not the case.
What if you
print
fluctuate though? You're inside consistent, and the material ingredients fluctuate a little bit with the temperature, right?
Yeah, and so one of the things that's important is sort of the air in the room. We've had prints where we'd be printing and be warm, and then I'd open a door, and then you immediately see a drop in temperature just by opening a door somewhere in the room, and this can positively or negatively affect your print. But incoming water temperature is another thing. It's nice to measure the incoming water temperature. At the same time, if you print over a longer time, in the beginning, your system heats up. Friction in the hose, for example, especially when you're adding two components as well, the system will heat up. So we measure the temperature on our motor, for example, on our print head, which gives us a nice indication as well, besides the incoming mortar and the outgoing mortar. We also have a motor temperature measures, so the combination of temperature, we have 4 spots in which we measure temperature, and then we have the 5 spots, including air temperature. So that combined gives us a good overview of if it's too hot or too cold.
I think now that I moved the podcast to a separate channel, the people listening are probably probably know what we're talking about, because it's like a small niche group of people who have the patience to listen to me talk to people for a long time. And so I think what you're saying right now, it's in the weeds, but it's really fascinating because this is the data you'll need in order to automate your systems further in the future. Like you're saying,
exactly,
the friction's heating up. So right now, maybe you're cooling down the water going into the system, but in the future, that can all be automated. It can automatically fix the temperature differential.
Absolutely. So in our case, what we've been good at, I mean, this is the third time we've had the chance to talk on the podcast, and it's fun to look back, right? From the beginning, we were just trying to find out what are the parameters, right? Now a couple of years later, we have a pretty decent overview of what are the things we want to measure. But the incoming water, for example, it's something we don't control. Our incoming water temperature in the Netherlands is relatively stable. I can imagine in Saudi Arabia, for example, it's quite high coming in. So then you want to cool. And the moment you're cooling, you have a good stable, or heating, for example, you have a very good stable temperature, right? In the winter, we have heated before. So you've controlled that break. But there are other factors. Humidity is one we would love to control. Very high humidity is nice, of course. That's something we'd love to control. But then again, in the space we have, which is a big startup space that is, an old building, it's impossible to control temperature and humidity. But if you're really going for extremely high quality, high detail printing, at some point that becomes interesting. And then hence, again, the challenges of printing outside, right? Where those things are literally impossible to control.
Yeah. So for your clients, you recommend they have a smaller room that they're printing in so that it's easy to control the climate?
I think one thing the one thing that frustrates us the most is the fact that our hall isn't heated. The humidity is secondary. The heating is primary. So we just noticed when it gets winter here, it's just cold. It's so cold that it affects our print quality. So we have to heat the water, for example. But in mid-December, we're not printing. Not really. We can heat the water, do some fun stuff, but we cannot guarantee the quality. So if you have a hall that you can even heat to above, let's say 10, 15 degrees Celsius, then you're already in a good position. So that would be my primary, to be able to have at least a hall that's heated.
Very nice. Are there any like canoe kind of projects coming up soon?
Yeah, you saw our last canoe, which we did a couple months ago. That was actually pretty cool because as you might know, the first project I ever did was a canoe, and I had no idea how to program a robot, and we also didn't know how to automatically mix concrete. So we hadn't figured out yet how to take a dry mix and have the duo mix, add water, and then print. Like we just didn't know. So I would mix the concrete by hand. I would throw it in the dry mix chamber of the duo mix. It would force it through the entire machine, and we would print, which is insane, right? And we used 1,700 kilos of sand to support the print because it was, curved. And then a year later, we printed another one, and we used lightweight aggregates to support the thing. We had an automatic mixing system, it was, or a more automatic mixing system. We got better. And we had 2 years COVID. And then this year we printed one, and it was fully automatic, and there was no support whatsoever because we managed to do a vault system in which it could lean on itself. And on top of that, it happened while I was on holiday. So the team did it here. And so I came back and we had one with no support and material printed, ready to go. So this was another really great example for me of, how it gets better, right? How the technology improves. Yeah, so that's cool. Projects we're doing now is we have a nice art piece coming up for an artist from Germany. He's installing in the Netherlands, but it's an art piece we're doing here. We're working with the TU Eindhoven to do some furniture, and we're doing some columns. And columns is something that, we haven't even started to see the potential of those yet. Like we've done some nice patterns and shapes, but we're still waiting on the first architects to see the potential of the columns. We do have an impressive RFQ running now for a set of columns outside with a whole cover over it, and some really amazing things inside a church, but that's all early days.
Cool, very nice. what does Vertico need the most right now to expand?
That's a good question. Time. I wish I had, 48 hours in a day. It costs a lot of time. Like, we've come to a point now where the technology is, one of the targets we had last year is to make the technology stable. And that's something that, in my opinion, we've achieved with the machine. So we're confident that it can produce in a stable manner. And this, if you are shipping them around the world, then that's something you need, right? You want it to be stable, and we haven't gone to a client yet to fix anything. We've been able to do any troubleshooting over the phone or over Zoom. So that means we've had some stability. So now we know what we're doing. And then the question becomes time. So how do we manage to, grow fast? So the people, luckily, we've been able to find, even though a lot of people have difficulty finding people, we haven't had to put much effort into that. We haven't actually put anything online in a year. We are looking for a technical sales guy now. I need support on sales because there's too much coming in. We need bigger space. We need more people, and that requires time. So it's not even money that's the issue. It's just scaling up fast. I was talking to some people from Icon the other day, and just to hear their stories of, what if you have an unlimited budget, then what, right? And then you see how they do that. And I think they're doing a good job in trying to scale that fast, but it's just the growth pains, right? Like how do you force something to grow that fast? That's something that we're struggling with too.
It's great that you haven't had to go out for support for your clients. There's some companies, they sell a printer and they have to build the first building that the company does. And then the company builds the second building and they don't build a third. For some reason, they do the first one on their own and they decide it's not worth it or something. I don't know. But there's multiple groups that have done the one structure that the company built for them, one more structure after that. And now who knows what's going on with their printer. It's been over a year.
It's not easy, and as more than anyone maybe, how hard it is to do, right? You've seen so many big construction sites, and it's a big challenge to start that big, right? It's another advantage of the way that we do it, is we started small. So our mistakes were small. We've talked about this before, right? I've seen mistakes on a house, for example, being printed where they started to print the roof, which was curved. And then they realized that some angle, the print layers don't touch anymore, right? Which is a typical mistake you make when you start in the printing process. Except I made that exact same mistake on a house model, basically, that was a meter wide, and so they're making big mistakes and on a large scale, which is difficult. And I think if you haven't developed the technology yourself, then to print that third or fourth house, you've got a lot of things to learn, right? Even if the printer's working. So yeah, you can't blame them. It's a tough thing to flip.
It seems like in Europe, a lot of the people buying these printers were able to do so with some kind of grant money or government funding, as opposed to private investor money.
Yeah, I'd have to look back at the clients that we have. Universities are a large part of our clients, and I think almost half are universities. And you could argue that all of their money is from grants, even though it's not necessarily the case. But you understand what I mean, right? Yeah. It's not necessarily not financed in that way. Yeah, it's certainly not private money. From the commercial projects that we've done, I see a lot in Eastern Europe. There's a lot of stuff coming from grants too. That makes sense. But anything west from where we are, we've seen done with private investment. So we've sold to some large companies that have this, capital to spend, and some startups which have raised money in their own way. But where European subsidies can be gotten, I recommend it. But I haven't seen any large printers being bought on subsidy, but it's possible. It's not my market.
Yeah, in the US, it's mostly, I think, investors risking their own money. It's interesting about Eastern Europe. I've seen probably like 24 companies pop up there. Young people mostly, really excited about rebuilding and all kinds of stuff. It's happening so fast. it'll be interesting to see whether they're able to achieve their goals. If it's a helpful thing, it's certainly playing out on a bigger scale than it had been in our past two conversations. So everything's happening bigger, faster, hopefully better. The roof.
What I see a lot is the housing printing machines, right? So that's, again, and it's something that I hadn't expected necessarily, but as you say, it's you even if you have a gantry, it's hard to do your third, fourth, fifth house. There's obviously companies doing it, but the amount of just before we got on the call, I saw another company that had developed a very, very large gantry printer.
Who's doing their third house?
I don't know. But I assume there are companies out there doing a third house. I don't follow them on, that closely, but
I'm not sure of any company that bought a printer that's doing their third house yet, actually.
Maybe the companies that develop their own printer.
There are
SQ4D or
there's a couple. I mean, SQ4D, they did a demo unit in a concrete plant, and then they did one house, which I'm not sure got a certificate of occupancy or not, and then they did a second one. So really, they'll have two done that are like real houses, intended to be real houses, hopefully.
Sure.
Maybe they'll start a third soon, but they're a manufacturer. Like Seabay's done a few different houses with different clients. Cobot's done all kinds, but each of them have a partner that usually bought the printer. So I try to segregate the manufacturers from the builders. It's tricky to draw the lines, but it's interesting. There's a crazy number of these companies now, so they it's got to be going somewhere.
Exactly. So all good luck to them. I hope they do find that solution that can copy paste the house. Great, fantastic. There's a large housing shortage, and good luck to them. And if they want to do some stuff around the house or some columns or whatever, give me a call. And there are companies now. We are part of tenders where they have bought a gantry machine, and then they want to buy a robotic machine to do some of the more highly detailed work. Right, sure. Some of the column work, or even pots or whatever, or windows, all these things. So you do see that people are understanding as well that there is two different styles of concrete printing that are in some sense mutually exclusive, right? The one can't do the thing that we do, but we certainly can't do the thing that they do in terms of scale. Mm-hmm. So people are beginning to understand, and for us, as we are one of the few suppliers of this, two component strategy, it's something we have to keep explaining. Why is your machine so different? Well, it's for we have a dosing pump extra, we have control of the nozzle, we have finer detail, we have bigger angles, we have much faster setting concrete, which allows us to make these angles, and it's something you have to explain up front when people start getting into the industry.
Have you been experimenting with materials much?
Well, yeah, we have now signed a partnership with Sika. So we've as we developed our own material mix initially, it meant that we weren't bound to any concrete supplier, and we know what's inside our mix, which is nice. So we're open to use any material, anybody's material, and also we're not in the business of shipping material across the ocean or across the seas. So we encourage our clients locally to make their own mix. So we provide our material recipe as well, so they can have it made locally. Alternatively, we now work with large concrete companies such as Sika or Heidelberg to test their materials, right? So we've done some printing projects for Heidelberg, some walls, and they've sent material to us to test for them, and we continue to do so. And at the same time, we did trials with Sika, and our trials with Sika showed that Sika's strategy for concrete 3D printing is similar to ours, right? So they have a very high detailed, very fine finishing of their material, and it's clearly something they're experts in, right? They are a company that provides additives, amongst other things, for concrete, which makes that their finish is very good. Mm-hmm. And this fits well with our strategy, right? We're not printing, houses and then covering it up with paint or whatever. No, we want the end results to be in the material itself. So we've partnered with Sika to make a 2-component material for our machine, which is nice. That will mean that we'll have a mix on the market, which is with white cement, which provides a good basis as well for adding color or whatnot, but also a nice basis to start. And we've already trialed the mix, and the improvements we're going to trial in a month or so. So that's what's happening on our material development side. That's the main thing that's happening on our material development side. And it gives us the opportunity to have a partner as strong as Sika, which have a worldwide presence. So they, can tell people that our machine is available as well, and they can provide material locally. So there's definitely among the material suppliers and the startups such as ours, a symbiotic relationship in that sense, for us to be able to cover the global marketplace and for them to be able to not have to worry about machine install and training and all those things. So that's a relationship that's going very well.
Yeah. What about other materials like Adobe? Have you ever tried running Adobe through the system?
So my answer to that, when clients ask us, is there's 4 parts to concrete printing. You have your robotics, you have your pumping, you have your slicing, and you have your material, right? We are experts in robotics. We know a lot about pumping and work with we know a lot about slicing because we have our own software. It's important for the design, but we are not experts in material. Material development costs a lot of time and energy and expertise, which we do not have in-house. So I always say that, for example, I look forward to having a material that's much less environmentally unfriendly, so to say. But it's something that I want other companies that have the expertise to develop, and then we will adopt it into our system. Mm-hmm. If we try to cover that also, we will just be losing time because it'll be too many things going at the same time. So it's not our expertise. It's not something I see us developing in the near future either. We will wait for suppliers.
I don't think there'll ever be suppliers of Adobe. It's just dirt from the ground and straws.
I don't know, but I know of several Earth experiments going on, and I'm always very interested to see what the results are. But until somebody wants to try and put it through our machine, we're gonna hold off.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about hempcrete too. There's so many people mentioning it, but I've never seen it printed. So there must be something wrong with it, I imagine. Because there's so much interest, somebody must have tried it. Why wouldn't they show me if it's cool?
It's out there. A good friend of mine here that started his venture also in the same location because we were here, is doing automation of rammed earth in a very interesting way. So that's another interesting angle to approach automated construction. So
that's awesome. I'll be able to do 2 birds, 1 stone next time I visit.
For sure, if you come within 6 months, because as I said, we're moving. But
how far are you moving?
We'll probably stay in the area, but we don't know yet. We're in the Netherlands for sure. So it's a small country. You'll be fine. But it's another way. It's another way to approach construction, right? It's very eco-friendly. So earth is the way to go. Seems to be for material development for sure. But as I said, it's not our area of expertise.
My plan right now, I put an order on a Cybertruck years ago. I'm hoping that it comes towards the summertime of 2023, and I'll immediately ship it to Europe, and I'll have the first Cybertruck in Europe, and I'll drive around for 6 months and visit all the 3D printed construction companies. You
can start a new podcast just on your experience driving around the first Cybertruck in Europe.
That'll just be a perk. It's still all about automated construction. But maybe we'll do the podcast in it. I don't know.
So these things they're all exciting developments, in the market right now in terms of materials, in terms of software. You're seeing more and more sort of companies focus on that specifically, which is interesting too, right? To run robotics and whatnot. But still, as 4 years ago, this industry just ticks the boxes. Except we're struggling on the sustainability part, but in terms of automation in construction, in terms of new materials, it's still booming for sure.
The beauty is the materials hopefully would be able to conform to the other 3 pillars, and it could be an overnight thing where, like you said, somebody develops a system and they have such a high level of expertise, they just deliver it.
Maybe, but what I see from the more technical side is that the pumps we use right now are still mortar pumps, right? So there's the ongoing discussion of, are we allowed to call it concrete printing, yes or no? What are the standards? And the concrete, the mortar pumps that we use have generally a maximum of 3 millimeter aggregate. Now, everybody's, you hear a lot that having a larger aggregate is good for the sustainability aspect. At the same time, I've heard very interesting talks recently in the Loughborough conference from some experts from Brazil that say that's not necessarily the case. There are other ways also to reduce, the carbon footprint of your material without going into large aggregate. So there's a discussion there, which is interesting. But the pumps we use now are still the 3 millimeter aggregate pumps. When it comes to larger aggregate, you're going to, as far as I know, a piston pump system. So there are some companies that are already doing larger aggregate pumping and printing. They are out there. At the same time, when you go to earth, you have a different challenge. You can't use the sort of most common concrete printing pumps to pump earth or clay, right? Because it just doesn't pump. It doesn't work. So I don't think there's going to be an overnight switch because the pumping system is different.
My channel sponsor, Ventures Equipment, their pump does up to 3/8 of an inch, which is 9.5 millimeters. So that's pretty good size. And
yeah,
usually I think traditional concrete is like 4 to 8 millimeters, something like that.
That's what I hear, 5 to 8. Yeah.
So there's also other companies. I know one in Germany, like THK something. I don't know. They're doing larger aggregate printing, and then Cobot even did a larger aggregate print in Canada. I believe I'm going up to see that pretty soon. So yeah, that'll be an interesting development. To use less sand, I think, is why it makes it more sustainable.
Sure, and less binder, right? So if you have more, sand there, you have a larger surface area to have to stick to. So you need more cement. As far as I know, you need more cement to cover the surface area to stick to, right? So yeah, but I'm no expert. But if you increase the aggregate size in your material mix, obviously you're decreasing the resolution of your wall, your smoothness. So that's something that you then have to solve as well, which is possible. But then how are you going to solve your smoothness on the edges, right? So it's a trade-off.
Digital Concrete 2022, did that happen yet?
Yeah, we were in Loughborough. So the conference was held there. They had their printer also. And it was interesting to see. It was very nice to see everybody again. It is a little bit of a community, of course, right? And it's the same face. So it was good to have everybody there again. It's obviously slightly more academic focused, right? Because that's the main the main guests are from the academic side. And in saying that, I think that there is still a lot of feedback from the industry that could be voiced, right? So something that I heard Timothy Wrangler from the ETH talk about, which I thought was very nice to hear, was his experience with the columns that they printed, the concrete choreography, and how a year later or so they now perform. And these are the kind of insights that are interesting for us from the industry side, right? We try to always jump to the conclusion, right? Instead of the fundamental research tries to do it properly. We as industry, we like to jump to the result, which is also useful. But I think there's a lot of lessons learned in the industry. For example, you talk about how the challenges of 3D printing houses. We have a list of challenges too for freeze thaw testing on our planters and whatnot, or UV light, you name it. There's definitely a sort of opportunity to have some feedback on that as well from the industry. So
yeah, so at Digital Concrete 2020 there was only one printer there.
They're their own printer, but from companies there were several, right? There was enough companies there to feedback, but most of the in these conferences you have to submit a paper and then you
the actual machine though.
There was at one at the university. Yeah, this wasn't like a trade fair or something. No.
I'd love to somewhere see multiple of these machines next to each other, printing the same thing or something.
To compare, right?
You said something about it being like kind of a community. I think it's definitely a community, and it's maybe the CEOs like yourself who are more in like a competitive mindset. Not that it's like blood in the water, that it's like violent competition, but I'm sure your team is always like going on the internet, looking at what the other companies are posting and different things. Like it's very much community, and I get to see the community because the companies, I'm talking to a bunch of them, and I think it's a strong community because it's a niche of people who are all really excited about kind of the same thing, and a mentality that we can like build a better future with technology.
Yeah, I think it's important too. And, in this industry, like in anyone, information is important, right? So of course I follow what's going on in the industry. At Loughborough, for example, I met Ashish from Hyperion, which is really nice to meet him in person. We had a good chat. And of course, we have a lot of lessons learned that we can share, right? So it's important also to get some confirmation that you're running into the same problems, or that you're getting the same weird RFQs, or that you're how you're going about growing and whatnot. So that's really nice to get into that community like that. And I always feel that it's better to have friends to share this information than to make enemies. And even in this community, there are people that tend to rock the boat, which I think is completely unnecessary, because there's more than enough fish in the ocean, to continue the maritime metaphor. It's better to have friends, right? And we have the Weber factory here. I still speak to them. We have Barry of Cybe. He and I speak, once or twice a year. We visit each other's factory to see how that's going. It's nice when you're not in direct competition, of course. That's a little bit more difficult, but yeah, it's better to have friends for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's great that you and Barry are able to collaborate, being both from the Netherlands. Similar systems, but very different goals, right? Like he's all about real estate, constructing real estate, and you're not.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah,
so very different. And then, yeah, so in that sense, there's the odd RFQ in which we are competitors, but it's not often, to be honest. So, that makes it easier for us as well to share information on the market and where it's going, because we don't compete in often in terms of system, which is nice.
Mentioned a house with a printed roof. There's only one of those that I know of by RIC in China, but I imagine the one you talked about with the gaps in the roof, maybe they didn't publicize it because it wasn't a successful project.
The gaps were done in prototyping, so they discovered that when they were printing the elements, right? So they didn't end up happening in the final version. And it wasn't the full project. It wasn't the full roof either, but I'll leave it to them. I don't want to criticize their work because the results are really nice, but I'll leave it in between because we all learn these lessons, right? These are not.
Yeah, I can speculate. So
yeah,
is there a second house for the Milestone project coming soon, do you think?
I do think so, and I hope so. Of course, it's 20 minutes drive from here, so sometimes we take. You and I went there when you were here.
Yeah, we did. It was great. The door was open. Good to walk in.
We were lucky, and they're open about it too, and which is really nice, right? That
girl was really sweet to us.
Yeah, and I commend them as well for the way that companies like that act as flagships, right? Because it's not easy to be the first. It's not easy to have the first projects, and people criticize. That's not easy. So I tend to support any lessons learned that come out from there. And I had a chat with them. We printed the pavilion here. The no formwork pavilion we did, and no rebar, compression only. And we did a little opening, and people from Weber came too, and we had a chat about what they're going to do in their next house. So yeah, they have the 5 buildings that are on schedule. That they are still going to be printing, and they're going to use the lessons learned that they had from the first house and improve for the second. So things can only get better on that side. So I'm very excited to see when they start, but it's something you can do a podcast with them about, I'm sure. Yeah,
I've invited their CEO on my podcast. We're trying to work it out. Hopefully it happens eventually. I'm sure it's not a priority for them because they're doing so many other construction projects, and so it's something that maybe they work on when they have time.
They have the print factory, right? They do print, and they're doing their business cases. They're doing their stairways, for example. They've done a very cool pool projects, which we don't see enough of. I would have liked to see more of the results there too. It was a very impressive project a while ago. But I don't know what they're printing right now. I don't know.
A lot of people tell me busy. Aren't possible because of no strength and tension, but if they did it, that's awesome.
So they did a formwork project, right? So this wasn't just a pool, it was a whole facility. So it was a giant facility with a whole bunch of different pools and connected and all that, like a big facility. So they did more of a former thing, which is really cool. So
Private facility?
I don't know. I don't know the details. There's been photos posted online already, but I don't know what the end result looks like. But these projects are happening. They're happening quite quietly, to be honest, sometimes, right? You'd expect them to make more noise about projects like this, but sometimes they happen quite quietly. It surprises me sometimes. There's an amazing concrete printed sculpture, I think, in the Czech Republic by Diaz. And they created a technique where they had a sort of a sand mold, and then they poured ultra high performance concrete on it. And the results are, spectacular. And it's also inside our niche. It's not getting a lot of attention, but it's an extremely impressive sort of sculptural project with water and lighting and all these things going on. So
on it or in it?
What?
They poured the concrete on it?
Yeah, so they did a sort of, I think they made a sand mold. And then they automated the making of the sand mold, and then the ultra high performance concrete went on top. Mm-hmm. If that was printed or poured, I'm not 100% sure, but it's certainly automated, right? With the making of the molds, and they went giant, and they're starting also a concrete printing company now in the Czech Republic, which, by the way, is booming. I know of 6 different concrete printing companies there now, including a company that uses our machine called Voxel. So they're booming too. For some reason, there's a lot of demand there for automation.
What kind of printing are they doing in the Czech Republic?
It's so similar. So with our machine, generally, it's the more high detailed, right? So it's the columns, it's the furniture, it's the planters, it's the unique objects, unique projects, right? That it's the scale of maximum 10 meters wide by 3 meters high by 2 meters deep. Otherwise, it becomes modular. Yeah.
So like basically the size of a Volkswagen Beetle or so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's one of the differences between concrete printing and 2-component printing, mono or 2-component, 1-component, whatever you want to call it, is that's the size, right? Once you go outside the range of a robot, a gantry becomes interesting. And once you go something that's that big, a mono material becomes interesting. Yeah.
Are you selling a lot of the smaller printers now, or are most of them going for the larger one at this point?
Right now, most of our sales are for the larger one.
That's great.
Obviously, it's surprising too. I estimated last year there would be a sort of balance, between because we do the 2-component printer, but obviously without our printhead, it's simply a 1-component printer, right? It's still the same pump and still the same robot. So you can also use a mono material. And then we have our small machines for training. So right now, most of the sales are for the largest machine, including accelerated printhead, because I think that people that want to get into 3D concrete printing also see the potential there. So this is for precast companies. That's the sort of companies we sell to, or startups or universities are in that space. And for us, the mono printer is more for people that want to get started, are on a budget. For example, we just installed a machine at the University of Budapest who want to do structural applications, right? So when you do, I've always said, when you do research into construction printing, even of houses, having a smaller robotic machine is a space saver and a time saver. You can fail fast with these machines. So the University of Budapest is a good example of a university that wanted to buy a gantry machine, but in the end, for budgetary reasons, but also for space reasons, decided to go for a robotic machine and ended up going with us for that expertise. And then when you go even smaller scale, just to start with material testing, you see the small machines like we sell. So those are popular too, but it's the large machines really that are in high demand.
Yeah, that seems to be a lot more value in the larger machines because of the time it takes for the layers to cure, right? And the material differences.
It all depends on what your goal is with the machine. If you buy the small machine from us for R&D, it's called an R&D machine for a reason. So the batches are still, you have to handmade the batch, and then you do about 30-40 liters inside a small pump, and then you pump to the robots, and then you do your test, maximum, let's say, 1 meter by 0.5 meter by 0.5 meter, something, that you should do with a machine that size. And that gives you the opportunity to do a lot of material testing and rapid prototyping. It's not a production machine. So you don't buy that machine with the goal of running any production at all. For the larger machine, that is the case. You can run production on that. However, if you want to produce construction elements like wall elements, it's the style that Saibi does as well. That's something you can produce modular, right? So you're making wall elements one by one by one. But if you're trying to test structural applications at the universities, for example, robot becomes interesting, and you're back to mono printing with a robot inside a smaller space, because they're not used every day, right? So it really depends on what you want to do. If you want to go for high-end prefab angles, etc., you got to go for the big investments. So yeah, it's not better or worse. It purely has to do with what is your intention with the machine.
I think it's better. I think if somebody's serious and they really want to get involved and they're going to stick with it, they know they're committed.
Yeah.
Go for the big one.
Yeah, sure. I agree. At the same time, if you go the machine, for example, at the University of Budapest, which is the single robot with the Mine Multimix, we can upgrade that, right? So by the time you've learned your lessons and you have new investment and you see what your potential is for your return on investment and you know your market, you can always upgrade to our 2-component machine. So you've had your lessons learned.
When you say with the My Multimix, the 2-component, it's just the head of the machine is the difference, right?
Yes. So the machine is, both machines have a robot, same robot. Both machines have the My Multimix, which is the dry mix to mortar, or the track if you like, right? Which is a dry mix to mortar. And then in order to do 2 components, there's a print head that mixes the material at the end of the robot, but we need another dosing pump to pump the accelerant there also. So you get a dosing pump. On top of that, we build a control box with a touchscreen HMI, which gives you an overview of all the sensors and data. And then we have a monitoring screen that live monitors all your data as you go and gives you an overview of what you're printing. So it's a new addition for us, so you can see actually what you're printing, what your object is going to look like, which is very nice, and a list of the parameters I talked about earlier, like which ones are important to measure. Those we have in a nice list now. So when you're doing 2-component, you can monitor very well. And that that complexity, so it's not just the print head, it's a print head plus dosing pump plus control box plus monitoring software. That complexity is nice and important when you're starting to run production, right? When you really want to monitor, or when you're doing research on that level, when you're researching in such detail that you want to measure all this data.
So have you had customers that bought it without all those upgrades and then got the upgrades afterwards?
Not yet. So we haven't sold the accelerator print head loose. Yeah. We have upgraded print heads to clients. So we have some upgraded versions that we are selling now, and they buy and they retrofit. So we made some upgrades to our initial machine. So that's happened, but we've only been selling these 2-component systems for 12. Well, what's it been now? November of last 10 months. So it hasn't been that long.
If a company didn't have the 2-component system and they wanted to upgrade, would you be able to ship them the parts and walk them through it, or would you need to go install it for them?
Yeah, for the 2 components we go and install. So the small machine actually is the R&D machine is designed to be used straight for the box, because we don't want to fly to you. It's, the budget is relatively minor. We're talking about 60,000 euros. You don't want to pay on top of that for us to fly over and help you. We can do all the training online, and we actually designed it so it fits on a pallet jack and you can just use it in your space, right? But anything bigger than that, especially installing a robot, it's nice to have support. Learning how to use the multimix, it's nice to have support. So if it's a robot install, then we tend to go there and do it with them or for them. If they already have a robot and it's only the multimix for the simple system, they can come to us and do the training here, which can be nice. And for the large system, we really want to do training with them on site.
Do you offer any kind of machines? Do you offer any trainings? I know some companies are doing like in-person trainings. People seem to really like that.
We offer the trainings with the sale of machine. So it's included in the sale of our machine. We don't tend to train people without having bought a machine.
I think people are paying like $3,000 just to do a training day.
In that case, send them my way. We'll be happy to train somebody for $3,000 for a day.
Yeah, I mean, they set it up. They have like 10 people in the class at once.
Yeah, it can be done if it's online, but then that's not how you want to learn in person. Yeah,
doing it in person.
Online is not how you want to learn
for that price in person. In online, about 1/10 of that price.
Right. So I've had some requests for people that want online training for that. But to be honest, the demand, in my opinion, isn't high enough to warrant us in setting up a program like that at present. Right. If you want to make something that's another thing with our niche, is that the complexity of the objects is something that is best taught with a little bit more time. Yeah. So even though you come here for a training, the printed patio guys were here a few weeks ago. They spent 5 days training here, and some of that is printing, but we will actually fly to Florida, install the machine, and then do the hardware training and experience on their machine, which is nice for them, to work with their own specific machine, even though they're exact copies. But it's nice to be here to see us print in our machine and our lessons learned in terms of, for example, cleaning, right? How do you dispose of water that's dirty? How do you dispose of concrete prints? These are little things like, where do you have your skip? How far away is it? How do you, in what order do you put your machines that it's easiest to assemble, disassemble? Do you have racks? Do you have dust extraction? How do you, we have, for example, a machine that, wet cleans our floor. These are all these little tips that you get when you're here physically, right? And same for slicing. So we have a lot of examples of projects that we did. So we encourage people to come here and train, but we also go there and then install, train locally. That's what we do most of the time.
Nice. Yeah, for every 3D printed construction company, there's an angry landlord with a clogged train.
Likely. We haven't had the issue yet, and the way we do it is simply it's not very advanced, to be honest. We have settlement tanks, so we do our cleaning on top of basically a tray, and then we let it settle overnight, and we check the acidity of the water. If need be, we can adjust the acidity, and then we drain the clean water on top, and then whatever the slurry that's left over, every few months or so, we throw that into our skips or containers, or whatever the American, I don't know what the American version is, container, I guess, waste container. So that seems to work for us. But there are very advanced systems that you can install where you can just clean straight, and they have drip trays and settlement, but that's something that's outside of our purview,
Yeah, you're more responsible than some of the other teams.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen it. And I hope you don't clog your drain. I don't even know what the consequences are. I don't want to find out. I don't want to find out what the consequences are. They're
not good, but is there anything that we didn't cover on this podcast so far that's new and exciting?
I don't know what's going on. It's what surprises me a little bit is, again, how fast the US market's going. That's very exciting. The amount of gantries that are coming onto the market, that's very exciting. Again, I agree with you. It surprises me how little 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 6th, 7th buildings there are being printed. I'd like to see more of that. Slowly, South America is coming more and more. RFQs are starting up there, and Southeast Asia also. They're following suit. And I know of a few Australian projects that are starting up that are happening down there too. So they're following. Africa has been a bit quiet for me as far as I know. Maybe you know more. Middle East is also still interested for sure. But maybe Africa is more into the 3D concrete printing of housing than they are into, fine detail architectural style things. That's basically what I'm seeing so far. And maybe you know more than I do, but I expect the first companies that, struggle to make it. I expect the first companies to quietly do other things. But we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, it will be fascinating. Like I said, there were 312 companies I was following. Now, as of today, there's 314 companies I'm following. So, so far, I'm not aware of any of them that have gone out of business.
No, me neither. Not yet.
But of the whole list, I'm sure just with that number, some crazy thing happens where somebody has an accident or something and they can't do it anymore. So they don't always make it public when they're not in operation anymore. So it's hard to say. And some of the people on that list, they expressed interest. Maybe they don't even have a machine yet. They just kind of had good marketing or something. It's hard to say often.
I'm sure you had one of the most complete lists out there, but I'm also sure that there's several that are, you know, dormant right now that I know that are coming that are not on your list. There's so many, and
I get a lot of dormant ones. I get a lot of dormant companies on the list because they contact me to ask, hey, which printer should I get?
That's good. I send people your way too if they're still not sure. They go, just contact Jeff Gross. He can give you some, you know, some advice on which way to go. But I'd be interesting to see. I mean, since you are neutral in this, I'd be interested at some point to see if you would share a pie chart or two, you know, on how many companies are there out there, you know, what continents are there on. You know, I think you could provide.
Yeah, I mean, the primary reason I haven't shared that list is because it's so disorganized. It's so sloppy, and I have these columns, and it's like I have the things I want to fill it out with, like email, location, what the printer, like just a little bit of information, like at least the country they're in. But
yeah,
there's so many, and there's such, like, I need help. If I had employees, I could get around to it. And it's like,
you send me the list. I can fill the countries maybe. I know that the Holders report, for anybody listening to this that doesn't know Holders Associates, they when I started in concrete printing, that's also the report, you know, the 400-page report that I read to understand what 3D printing is and what the market's like. They're starting to do some construction 3D printing stuff in there as well.
Yeah, so I know Stefan works there now.
Exactly, right. So Stefan is working on that, which is fantastic. Which means that, you know, it's another one of those strange little milestones in the concrete printing industry where you're like, okay, so now it's positioning itself in Holders industry where, you know, the maturity, it's one of those maturity milestones. That's nice to see. I'd love to see the results in the Holders report for sure. Maybe they have some of these graphics also.
Definitely. Yeah. So if somebody wants to work for you, you mentioned time is your biggest constraint. How do they contact you?
The website info@vertico3d.com or recruitment@vertico3d.com. We are open to open applications. You don't all backgrounds, all, you know, ages, colors, creed, whatever the applicant. Enthusiasm is important for us. You got to be enthusiastic. You got to, like, you know, you got to come here with a smile. That's something that we find very important. And again, the ones specifically working for technical salespeople now, but we're also on project management. We are hiring another operator. These are things that are open. We'll probably be open for a while too.
For anyone listening that wants to work at Vertico, I recommend you add your favorite philosophical quotes as well. Give Volker.
That helps. Yeah, it helps. Hobbies, you know, like, what do you do? What do you like doing? What have you done in the past? And, you know, send some portfolio if you have it, or something you're proud of that I like to see, you know, what makes you tick, what makes you get up in the morning, right?
I know,
and if we can apply that here, great. For me, as I said, you know, the background's not an issue. My background is non-technical, as you know. I have a degree in philosophy, so if I can, you can definitely too. Be in concrete printing. That shouldn't be that much of an issue. Interestingly, on that point, maybe as a more broader market type thing, you know, what we see a lot of applicants here. A couple of years ago, I was worried that we wouldn't get enough people with grasshopper experience, and the opposite has been true. So a lot of people that find us are computational designers, architects, digital manufacturing masters, etc. So yeah, so the supply of, you know, people with that skill set is a lot higher than I thought it would be. Now try and find people that are into project management, which is not necessarily an additive manufacturing skill. Finance, sales, you know, these things that are not exclusively additive manufacturing, digital manufacturing, right? So I'm finding that that's now the challenge to find. So anybody out there that's vaguely interested in 3D concrete printing or additive manufacturing and has a different background, we have work.
It's easy for me to imagine the grasshopper people being really passionate about their work. It's a little harder for me to imagine the finance guys being passionate about it, but
for sure. But they're out there, right? They got to be, like, they're out there that like to. I mean, I can only imagine that, you know, to be part of something where the product is this fun, right? I mean, it's just cool. You walk out the door here, you see a robot making a column in no time. I mean, that's got to mean something, right?
There's something deeply satisfying about machines doing work for people I think everybody just loves to see it, whether it's a Roomba or a factory producing Snickers, whatever it is.
We like to live in additive manufacturing, concrete printing. We like to live in the illusion that all of it's that easy, right? So once it starts working as printing, we're all like, just chilling. We can't do anything because the machine's working.
That's what makes all the sweat, blood, and tears worthwhile.
Yeah, it's that.
One day,
exactly that.
We'll be sipping Mai Tais watching the printer.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll happen. So again, the reliability is there, but you got to put the work in to make it happen, right? It's the tough one.
Yeah, man.
But I'm excited to see what kind of reactions you get again. I literally get people calling me and saying, you said in Jared's first podcast with you, and you said in the second podcast, you said this, is that still the case? And so there's definitely feedback. So I'm happy that you want to put it out there again. And thank you for taking the time, for sure.
Yeah, there'll be a fourth and a fifth, I hope, as well.
Yeah, exactly. And after a while, we can look back and go, oh my God, like, look at that hair, and look at that beard, and look at that, We'll see.
Hey, that's just
anyway.
Me. You got the same hair.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I get a beard. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But if anybody's watching, I hope stay involved, right? Thanks for the channel.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's watching at this point, but who knows?
They will. When you reposted the old ones, I got feedback like, "Oh, you got your new podcast with Jared." I said, "No, it's reposting the old ones." Yeah,
the average watch time though is like 10 minutes or something. So very few, maybe 1 in 10 people gets to this part of the podcast.
I get feedback. We
can say whatever we want. Nobody will.
On that note, 10% discount. No, on that note. I do have a new video of our print head coming out. It's been sitting on the shelf for a little while because we're just busy with selling. And if you like, we can do an exclusive on your channel. I can send you the video. You can add it here, and I'll wait a while, and you can have a nice show of what our new system can do. Yeah, for sure. If you can get a bunch of footage of prints, that would be a great video of especially we have comparing promo. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, cool. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time, maybe in Europe. Thank you, Jared. Good to see you. All right, later on.